Now, this is the year 1939. It's 35 years only since the Wright brothers managed to get a powered plane off the ground at Kitty Hawk. And planes are being developed very, very rapidly during this time because it's 35 years. That's it. A plane that was designed in 1931, 8 years later in 1939, is seriously obsolete. It's got an open cockpit. When the Poles meet the Germans with their open cockpit plane, they find themselves up against planes with closed cockpits that can actually put oxygen into the cockpit, that fly much faster than their planes because the German bombers are capable of flying at 30 miles an hour or 50 kilometers an hour faster than the Polish fighter planes. They've already learned by that stage that the fuel used in high-performance aircraft needs to be thinner and superior to the normal thick fuel that you put into a motor car. So there is air fuel and automobile fuel. The air fuel makes the plane work better, but you have to have it. And what actually had occurred by the move from the main airfield to the temporary airfield where they had readied themselves for the attack is that the fuel was being moved from the main airfield to the new one, and there wasn't enough there. And there were a whole lot of jobs that had to be done to maintain and keep the planes in the air that lead me to alert you to the fact that an airplane at that stage in World War I was not unlike the charger that a knight in armor would use as his horse 500 years before. Numerous people were needed to keep that plane in the air. You needed a mechanic who could fix the radial engine and keep it working to a standard where it could be used in combat. You needed another man who could load the ammunition into the plane and load it properly so that there were no jams or twists in the ammunition belt, and that ammunition was seated properly in the wings. You needed, when there was combat, you needed people who could patch up the bullet holes in the aircraft. You needed people who could work on the wires and the levers and the controls and the measuring devices for the plane. To give you an indication of the superiority or the level of development in the measuring devices, the speedometer was a metal flap sticking out from the side of the aircraft. And this metal flap caught the wind from the movement, the forward movement of the plane, and it was pushed back. And then there was a little painting of the speed on the side of the plane. And depending on how far the wind pushed this flap back, you knew how fast you were flying. This was still very early days and quite primitive, but people were staking their lives on these aircraft. And the fuel that was used was a critical part of the fairly rapid collapse of the Polish Air Force, because as the Germans crossed the border and captured territory, the Polish flyers lost their air fuel and had to start mixing it with automobile fuel, and thus inhibiting the performance of the planes they were flying. They couldn't fly as fast and they couldn't get as high.